Guys, so today I'm talking about the Spyderco ROC. Very interesting cleaver folder from Spyderco. This is their first collaboration with Serge Panchenko, which is a very well-known knife maker in the community now, doing a lot of interesting different designs. So a cleaver style folder is, I mean, you might think it's kind of a novelty and there's no real use for it, but it definitely is a very usable knife. It just has slight disadvantages that are obvious, like for example, no point. But there's not really no point. If you look at it, you're like, okay, well, yeah, there's no point. Well, this is still a point. If you pretend like the rest of the knife is not there and you turn it, you could see that this is a point. It's just a very wide point. Okay, so we have this type of point as opposed to something that's much narrower that we're used to. It's still very usable. In fact, most of the cutting I did with this was right up there, opening boxes and such. I did a lot more package opening with this and EDCs as opposed to, like, you know, just slicing cardboard and paper and plastic. It does hold a pretty decent edge. This is a VG10 blade, which is totally adequate. Very impressive to some, just kind of average to other people, but I think VG10 is kind of underrated because of all the other awesome steels that are out there. This knife is manufactured and made in Japan. If I could zoom in here on the markings, we can see that a little bit better. All right, once it focuses. So you can see right there, VG10, Japan. All right, there's Serge's maker's mark. All right, flip it over, just have the Spyderco bug, of course, and the Spyderco logo, real small in this little nook here. All right, some quick specs on this. 3.1 inches on our blade. All right, close, it's 4.6 inches, making it 7.7 inches overall. It is fairly lightweight because of the open back design, just some quick standoffs as well as the liners. Again, zooming in, you can probably see the cutouts in there, or lightning holes that are done once I let that focus. There we go. A little bit better. All right, but the weight is 4.1 ounces, or 4.1 ounce, I should say, not ounces. Very lightweight for the design. Because you have so much steel in the blade, you have to make up for that somehow, and that's what they did with the open frame. All right, it's a very simple design. Stainless liners, G10 slabs for the scales. All right, this one features a wire pocket clip. As you guys know, I am a huge fan of wire pocket clips. Does carry beautifully in the pocket. That extra blade doesn't seem to get in the way or anything. It is going to be a little bit offset from the seam of your pocket. If you're used to, you know, most knives, the blade is pretty tucked close to the handles. Obviously, this one sticks out quite a bit. So in other words, if, let's say, I don't know, let's say this line in the table is the end of your pocket, a lot of times your knife will be something like that, whereas this one's going to be more towards the middle of your pocket because that blade is sticking out. All right, because it's sticking out as well, I caught myself doing this a couple times. All right, you can see it is fashioned in a tip-up right side carry. The pocket clip is swappable to left side, but only for tip-up. But I caught myself doing this where I pulled it out of the pocket, kind of grabbed onto all that blade, used my middle finger to flick the knife open, and then, you know, proceeded to rip open boxes because I have a lot of control right up front, especially with your fingers behind that point. Once you puncture into a box to open it, you can use your fingertips as a guide. All right, so you're not slicing all the way deep into the box and possibly cutting the contents. All right, so kind of a cool little, you know, feature that's not really made that way. It just so happens that there's so much blade sticking out. It's just really easy to pull out of the pocket. Again, use your middle finger to flick the handle away. All right, completely opens, and then you're just tucking in. Now you can see there is a small lanyard hole on this one, and it does seem kind of small compared to a lot of other lanyards. I did try some 550 through there, a little bit tighter. Just depends on how you're melting that tip. Make sure when you first hit it to kind of, before it melts completely, to twist the tip in your finger so it comes to a point as opposed to like a ball or glob on the end. It makes it a lot harder to get through, especially smaller lanyard holes like that. This is a liner lock. All right, I will say that I have had problems with the liner, not the lockup at all, but with it grabbing my skin on my thumb. All right, if you come in closer, you can see there is a scalloped cutout on there, so you can grab it. However, you have to kind of push in on this side of the liner pretty hard before you grab that liner lock. All right, if you do that, there's no problems. However, just in normal use and not thinking about it, I would put my thumb on the liner then push in. And what I'm doing is I'm trapping the skin on my thumb in between the liner lock and this G10 scale. It actually happened quite often, okay? Just like that. I don't know if you could tell, but my finger, if you look at this, my finger's in there, okay? The skin on my thumb, ow, was pinched in between these two parts. All right, so just something to be very conscious of is to kind of push harder and sweep in, all right, from the edge, as opposed to putting it in the middle and then pushing over. Okay, now you can, you know, argue that that would happen with a lot of different liner locks, but generally it doesn't happen. It's not something I think about. I just take the knife out and use it. But I had to be more conscious of that when opening it, all right, is to push it, you know, more towards this side. Not a huge deal, but definitely just something worth mentioning. It is a hollow ground blade. It's kind of cool. It's bead blasted, which looks nice. It's kind of a flat gray finish because of the bead blasting. But when you bead blast metal, you're opening up the pores, which makes it more susceptible to surface rust. More particularly if you live on the coast, you got that saltwater air, or if you're in a very humid environment or something. Any bead blasted parts on any knives, you should really take a little bit extra care on. Just lightly wipe it down with an oiled rag. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to like have it, you know, oil slathered all over it. Just a quick little wipe. If you're going to be storing it, you know, for more than say 48 hours or something, you know, if it's your EDC, it's not that big of a deal. Just wipe it down once or twice. But if you're going to keep it, you know, in a drawer, in a case or somewhere, you know, you might want to coat that in oil just to prevent any kind of problems. You don't want to get surface rust. Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool knife. I like it. It is very functional. I did find it to be a little bit on the uncomfortable side. I wouldn't go as far as saying uncomfortable, but I'm very used to finger choils. And you can see that by design, this is just one big sweep. So what happens is my fingers want to tuck in, and naturally when I'm squeezing down my grip, my pointer finger and middle finger squeeze together because there's no real place for my pointer finger to go. I would have preferred a finger choil here. I'm just so used to finger choils on lots of different knives, but more particularly Spyderco. A lot of their models have somewhat of a finger choil that makes for a very comfortable grip. This does not. And of course you can't choke up because this is just, you know, an empty void or space. That's not meant to be a choil. You can't put your finger there. I mean, I guess the fingertip, but that's not really, I don't believe it was designed that way. So, I mean, this is where comfort and ergonomics and design and looks and aesthetics kind of clash a little bit, because I'm sure the designer, Serge, I'm sure he wanted a certain look, and that's what you get. But you're also giving up just a little bit of that comfort. Like I said, not quite discomforting, you know, it's okay to hold. It's just I really find that when I'm squeezing down harder and using it a little bit harder, that my pointer finger, they just kind of squeeze together because everything wants to slope down into the middle here. Aesthetically, I think it would still be really good looking if they did round this off and incorporate the choil into here, basically knocking off this corner. I still think that would look really nice, and it would still be very much a cleaver style knife. But you know, it is what it is. That's the design. But I think that it would have been more beneficial for ergos and comfort by rounding it off and creating an actual finger choil underneath that blade, so you can get a lot of control. Specifically because you have the advantage of such a wide blade here, you can do a nice deep finger choil. All right, so again, if you don't know what I'm saying, continue this curve through the handle. So there's one big curve here. You put your big old finger there and choke up real tight and have a lot of control with this. As far as cost on these, they're selling pretty consistently at $175. You can find them on the dealer sites for $175, but also on Amazon. There's not much fluctuation in price there. Sometimes on the Amazon and eBay, they'll be slightly cheaper or even more expensive depending on who the seller is. But it's been pretty consistent. $175 is the range for the Spyderco ROC. I think it is kind of a phase that the industry is seeing. There's a lot of companies doing cleaver style folders, a lot of custom makers doing a cleaver style folder. It's very cool, it's very different. It is usable. There are some slight drawbacks, obviously having a wider point there as opposed to more of a traditional, blade shape. So overall, I mean, it's a really interesting knife. These sell for $175 pretty consistently. Sometimes there's a fluctuation in prices between the knife dealer sites and places like Amazon and eBay, but it's pretty consistent. If you want a Spyderco ROC, 175 bills. That's what it's going to cost. If you are looking for something like this, if this is fascinating to you, there are plenty of other companies that are making cleaver style folders like this on the cheap. In fact, I don't have any experience with one, but I'd be interested in trying in the future. the Gerber Flatiron. Although it's a downgrade in quality and blade steel, I think it's a 7CR 13LV. I could be wrong on that, but it's a cheaper, Chinese steel. But those are 30 bucks or $29. Basically the same thing, different company, different package, but the overall feel. So if you think this is a fun little novelty, but you don't want to spend $175 on that fun factor, then there are other options, and I'm sure there's plenty of others besides the Gerber. It's just something I happened to see recently and thought it was pretty cool that Gerber did something like that. If actually, totally unrelated to this video, but if you happen to have a Gerber Flatiron, let me know your experiences with it down in the comments. Kind of interesting little chubby pocket clip. But anyway, nothing to do with this video other than it's also a Cleaver style folder. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a usable knife. I carried it a lot. I used it. It worked fine. It just wasn't as good, as comfortable as a lot of the other Spyderco options out there. And some would probably claim that, all right, $175 for some VG10 and G10, simple design, that's not worth it. Well, I mean, worth it is very, very subjective. Plenty of people will buy this knife. Plenty of people will save it, collect it. They'll sell it for even more money down the road. It is cool. There is a novelty factor there, but I'm here to tell you that it is a functional blade. Not the best EDC choice in my opinion, because it is a little more restrictive. I think this would be pretty cool for food prep if, huge caveat here, if you clean your knives, all right? There's very few people out there that use folding knives for food preparation, and it's for the obvious reason that when you're cutting vegetables and tomatoes and things that are juicy and nasty and raw meat, you don't want all that juice and junk going down in your pivot. Right, it's gonna be very difficult to clean unless you frequently take your folders apart. That's why kitchen knives are not folding knives, they're fixed blades, which is very easy to use. They usually have a thinner grind on it and so forth as well. But yeah, I don't recommend using a folding knife for cutting food and food prep. Besides that, something else that people often talk about is your choice of lubrication. That could be not, it could be non-toxic. Most times it is toxic. All right, if you're putting your regular old gun oil on there, you don't want to mix it in with your food either. All right, something to consider there. So just saying it though, because occasionally people do mention food prep with folders. Don't recommend it, but if you had to do that, consider things like the type of lubricant you're using for that, as well as cleaning. All right, it's a very intense cleaning process compared to just using a fixed blade. But yeah, I mean, with this one, my only real issues is the liner lock pinches me, and it's kind of annoying. And I just really, really wish they went with a finger choil for this model. Would have been just that much more comfortable. But I do think it's cool. I do think it's fascinating. As you guys know, I love things that are different. Because it has a Cleaver blade, it's different. So anyway, let me know down in the comments a couple of those things I was talking about. Do you have the Gerber Flatiron? What do you think of it? Do you have a ROC? Is it an interesting knife that you would get? If you got it, would you use it? Or is it a collectible to you? And what do you think about the phase of Cleaver style folders? Is that going to pass? Is that something that's just we're seeing now that will quickly dissipate as something new comes along? Or is that a lasting knife design for folding knives? All right, obviously, as we know, the straight razor utilizes a, Cleaver style blade, I guess, in one form or another. But yeah, besides that, personally, I just think it's a cool thing that's new. That's all. I don't think we're going to see that a couple of years from now, at least not nearly as much as we're seeing it now. But anyway, that's all. Let me know your opinions on all those questions I have asked throughout the video. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video. Take care.